Well, welcome into another edition of The Point After on the Oklahoma Sports Network, part of the podcast studios at Cameron University. And so we appreciate them allowing us to have a little bit of studio time for today. And well, ready or not, we talked about this coming in a fast, furious way. We're ready for this. This is the fastest basketball tournament that's around. I know that you can say, well, a tournament is usually 2-3 days and then it's over with. And that's kind of what this is, spread out with just a couple of weeks of that kind of intensity with basketball, because districts, regionals, there's over. We have our regional champions. Congratulations to many of them for both boys and girls coming from the Oklahoma Sports Network, and then some runner-ups. And we're going to talk about those matchups where we're going to have Thursday slated for boys. In fact, that's going to be 4 teams that are going to be playing, and all 4 of them are OSN teams. So one is going to be bowed out with a loss. One of them is going to get their first loss and then go to the other side of the bracket. And so that's kind of how that's going to narrow down. But congratulations, got through regionals, regional champions. Now we're into what's called area. And this is where it really counts, because it matches the final 8 to make it into state. And so it's a very special elite company when it comes to West versus East when you punch your ticket. So it's a special time of the year. And I know someone that gets really excited is our special guest from the Mid-Del area, and he does our Mid-Del sports report. So he's very amped on representing all 3 for both boys and girls for Del City, Carl Albert, and Midwest City. It's Mr. Jordan Rhea. Jordan, thank you for joining us. And I know, because I saw your post from remembering a year ago, where all the Mid-Del schools, all 3, boys and girls, made it to state. And that was a great run last year, but we got some great representation this year as well.
Yeah, 6 teams. So 3 boys, 3 girls, yeah, like you said. And that's when I had my coaches show active. And the games were Thursday, Friday, Saturday in state. So on Wednesday, I could talk to all the coaches, and during the coaches show, all 6 head coaches. Those are good times. And I think from this past week, just looking back at it for a bit, Eric, what we learned is, it's home sweet home matters. There was not a single road team winning over in 5A West on the west side. The only lower seeded team to win on the first round game was Altus being Lawton MacArthur in girls. Well, that's a 4-5 matchup. And I was really looking forward to Friday evening's games, where I thought all the Mid-Del teams were in really interesting games that could come down to the wire. Nope, none of them. None of them came down to the wire. And the home teams won, just like you expect. And I think, we have seen teams win on the road occasionally. Last year it happened a couple times in 5A West, but it's the exception to the rule. And this is why district games, they matter so much. So this will be a reminder in years to come. District games matter. You got to try to win those. You got to try to you got to try to get to where you can host a regional.
Well, and we see that in football too, because districts matter there, and and the top 2 will host. And so, I guess it's rewarding you for the regular season, and not just putting you in some kind of and I don't like it when you have like polls and coaches and all the rest of that stuff. You just kind of have it earned on the field, or in this matter on the court. And that's what happened. And you just had, for our representation for the Oklahoma Sports Network, you had Lawton High, Del City, and Midwest City for boys, all in the same district. And Del City and Lawton High tie, but it came down to points, and a couple of points made a difference of hosting at a 1 as hosting as a 2. So it did matter, and it looked like it came through as what you and I kind of talked about on paper, what it looked like. But we've got games, girls on Tuesday and boys on Thursday, and then for those who are still in consolation rounds, will be Friday. So we got a very busy week ahead.
Yeah, so I'll make this quick. It was pretty simple. I overthought it in weeks past when I would give my poll for who I thought was most likely to win state for Mid-Del. Basically, it's the teams that hosted over the teams that didn't. So I would put Del City girls 1 again, Del City boys 2, Carl Albert girls 3, Carl Albert boys 4 now because they won their regional championships, so they're in better shape. Midwest City boys 5, Midwest City girls 6. because the Midwest City boys, they made it tough on themselves by having to play El Reno at El Reno. They're still alive, though, of course, but they'll have to go through the consolation round, which they can. So now for this episode, what I'm going to talk about is the most intriguing games and most intriguing matchups that we'll have on the network, particularly featuring Mid-Del teams, which so many games will. But number one for me would be Del City boys actually against El Reno boys. I think whoever loses that game will still get to state. I think these are two teams, when I watch both, I think these are two teams that can win state. And what makes this game so important, these area championship games, is if you look over at the east side, and I haven't figured out all the potential matchups yet, but there's two strong teams of both girls and boys that went undefeated in their districts. So on the boys' side, it's Booker T and Tulsa Memorial. Now, they both won their regionals, so if they win their games on Thursday, you win your games on Thursday. If you're Del City or if you're Lawton High or Carl Albert playing each other, you will have a first-round matchup against someone other than Booker T and Tulsa Memorial. And I think that's important because you could on Monday survive an off shooting day against one of those other teams in the East and perhaps still win. But if you play Tulsa Memorial or Booker T in round one, you have to play a tremendous game with very few mistakes. So that's true on the girls' side as well. So anyway, back to that. El Reno is a really well-coached team. They play tremendous team basketball. They move well without the ball. They got a tremendous guard in Carter Romanos. And then they got a big man who Eli who came over, and his name escapes me at the moment, but Trey Davis, who's really good. Del City's a good matchup for that, for the most part. Now, they don't have anyone as tall as Trey Davis, but they got athletes and they got some size they can throw at him that could frustrate him. Also, a big player for Del City is Caleb Blackwolf. Well, he played for El Reno last year in basketball, was a really good freshman. So you'll be able to see him going up against his old team, including someone like Carter Romanos, who he may guard. So that's number one as far as interesting matchups go for me. Number two, the next interesting matchup I would say actually would be a consolation game between Midwest City and Lawton MacArthur, because like you mentioned off the air, Eric, neither team has a lot of size. Now, Midwest City does have a developing big man who I think will be pretty good, but he's a sophomore. And otherwise, it's a very guard-oriented team. And the same is true for – I'm talking about Kenyon Brown, by the way, their big man. And the same is true for Lawton MacArthur. They got a lot of good players, but they're a very guard-oriented team. Those teams have already played in UConn back in December. So, and Midwest City, I think, won by 10. So this will be Lawton MacArthur, interestingly enough, Eric, in your neck of the woods. This year, they'll have the full Mid-Del experience. They played Carl Albert twice. They've now played Del City twice, and they will play Midwest City twice. So they have seen all of those teams. They were able to win a rematch against Carl Albert. They could not win a rematch against Del City. Can they win a rematch against Midwest City? We'll see. But I think the winner of that game does have a shot at getting the state. And perhaps more so if they play Carl Albert than Lawton High, but either one is a winnable game. I mean, obviously, Midwest City beat Lawton High. Lawton MacArthur had a game where they almost beat Lawton High, even though they had another game where they got blown out. So you never know. But they also beat Carl Albert. And I think Midwest City matches up well with Carl Albert. So that's where you look at two teams that could possibly upset a team come Friday. The next most interesting game to me, we'd probably say would be Del City girls against El Reno girls. El Reno is the defending champs. And I don't think they have lost in the playoffs before state since 2021.
Wow.
They usually go 3-0. This would be tough for them to do so. They can, because they're a very well-coached team. They have very intelligent players. But I've talked about the Del City girls a lot. I think they're a team on a mission. They're so deep. They can throw so many different types of matchups on you. So it would be an intriguing matchup. Last time Del City got to state, by the way, was 5 years ago, which was the last time El Reno didn't get to state, because that's when they beat El Reno by 1 point. Now, that was in an area consolation game. But still, that's that's kind of interesting because Del City won the regional championship against Altus this year. That's who they beat 5 years ago. So they could get to state by beating El Reno this time around too, like they did 5 years ago. The next most interesting game to me is the Carl Albert girls in class and SAS over in Piedmont. Because, again, on the girls' side, it's the same type of stakes. If you can avoid a Coweta or Booker T girls, because those two girls teams both went undefeated in their districts, you can avoid them in the first round. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win, but you're just going to have an opponent where you could more likely survive an off game. And that could be very important when you're having all these games in this 3 week span. You're bound to have a kind of an off night, if you will. You want your off night to be against a less talented team. And Class and SAS, they looked very mortal against Del City when they played them. When they beat Guyman, they didn't beat them by much. They looked great against Midwest City when they played them, though. So who knows? But they got some really good athletes in their starting lineup, some good guards. I think it's a very, very interesting matchup. I like really what this Carl Albert girls team has been about this season. They've surprised me by how well they played together because I thought, they lost some really good players from last year's team, but they haven't missed a beat yet. Next up, Carl Albert boys against Lawton High would be the fifth most interesting game to me. That's a very interesting game. Don't get me wrong. Carl Albert boys, I was impressed with how they beat John Marshall going up by 30. I think they played just an outstanding game, and they're kind of clicking at the right time, like you could say that Lawton MacArthur was until he ran against a buzzsaw known as Del City, and maybe Lawton MacArthur will be just fine. But anyway, back to Carl Albert. But the matchup, Lawton High, I know you don't take a whole lot of them whooping Elgin, but you just look at the whole season, that's the team I would be the most scared of. So I still think, and I look forward to calling that game with you. I think that could be a great game, but I just have a feeling that Lawton High will be a really tough matchup for Carl Albert. And then, I'm not doubting Carl Albert could win, but Lawton High is a type of team that I could see being really explosive and, winning by double figures too. And then at the end, I'm not sure. I don't want to get too down on the Midwest City girls. I thought they played with a lot of heart against Carl Albert. There was a big free throw discrepancy in that loss. Not saying it meant that there was bad calls, like a lot of them. It was just something they had to overcome, and it was a hard thing to do. But they do have trouble scoring this year compared to previous years. And they're going to play a Guyman team who has been known to stall before, like earlier in games than just at the end. So I don't think they do that as much on the road or away from home. But and Guyman actually did play well in their loss to Class and SAS. So I think that could be a very competitive game. But I also think it won't be an aesthetically pleasing game. The calling card for the Midwest City girls is their defense. And I think it will be a very low-scoring game and with some turnovers potentially. Having said all that, you have you rank the games like you rank the teams. You have to have someone at the bottom. All 6 games featuring Mid-Del teams are very intriguing. They all have the potential to be very close, and hopefully we'll have some. We didn't have a lot of close games last week, so I'm thinking now with some neutral site games, as they all will be neutral site games, that now we'll start to see some close matchups and hopefully some exciting ones.
Yeah, and that starts Tuesday for the girls and Thursday for the boys. And you can check your local listings. What is that? Yeah, on our social media, Facebook, on X, and on Instagram. We'll tell you the schedule of the opponents and the times. I know that it's going to be a fun run. As we mentioned, you'll be joining me on that broadcast for Thursday because we got two vantage points of it, one from the Southwest region here in the Lawton with Lawton High and MacArthur, and then you're going to have that aspect for Midwest City and Carl Albert. So should be a great week, and strap yourselves in because then Friday, the ones with the no-loss regional champions will get to have one more chance to that consolation finally punch that ticket to state, and it's a very special time. They put a lot of hard work for this, and we're on the downhill slide now. I know that we're going to be very busy this coming week, and then in the next week, wrapping it all up.
Yes. Next week will be crazy. We'll just see how many teams are in.
Yeah.
But you got a really weird schedule. The first round Monday at the state fairgrounds. Second round not till Thursday at a different site, Yukon High School.
Yes.
And then who knows what time the championship games could be for girls and boys 5A. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're not together. So one could be an early afternoon game. One could be a late evening game. I have no idea what to expect there. They're trying to squeeze in a lot of games. I think it's 8. That's a lot of games to put in one day. But back to the area again. Yeah, this is again where you see teams that went 2-0, won their region, and every team that did, you can say is playing really good basketball right now and is going to play against another team that's played really good basketball the last few weeks and months. And so and they're not elimination games, but they got to be played like it because the teams that win have an advantage heading into the following week. And the teams that lose could get to state anyway by winning on Friday, but then they'll have a more than likely, but who knows if there'll be an upset on the east side, more than likely they will have a really tough opponent in the first round, and then every opponent will be tough after that. The second and third round in state, those games will be extremely tough no matter what.
Right.
It's the hope is to get a first round game that's not as tough. And again, you can, not that you wouldn't try hard or anything like that, but you could survive a tough showing if you don't shoot very well or you're just not very sharp.
Yeah, and then get to the semifinals and finals.
Just get to the semifinals, and then you got to play lights out.
Yep, and that's and they know what's in front of them, so it's an exciting time, and a reminder that when it gets to state next week for the first time, 5A and 6A is going to be at the Big House. So they normally have shopped out for the last couple of years. We're in Norman at Lloyd Noble. Before that, it was at the Maybe Center in Tulsa, and so it kind of went back and forth with those, and finally it's all under one roof. The new building is not ready yet. That will be for next year, and that will take down the old, and they've done a lot of great stuff on the OSSAA on their Facebook page to kind of show the history of that and some of the great games that were played there throughout the history of that building. But you're going to upgrade and get a brand new one for next year. So, Jordan, I know we're excited to see you on Thursday for a doubleheader, for a great night and a good representation of our Oklahoma Sports Network teams.
All right, Eric, can't wait.
All right, Jordan Rhea from Mid-Del, representing Midwest City, Del City, and Carl Albert. And that's kind of this rundown of area that represents our teams in the network. A little plug, too, for something this week. We're going to start soccer. Eisenhower Soccer is going to be underway this week. So overlap. This is kind of what we did with football and basketball starting up. You got soccer this week, along with the conclusion of area and then state basketball. And then we've got lacrosse on Friday and Saturday at the University of Oklahoma. So we're going to be having that as well. So full slate. Make sure that you download our free app. It's free to download and free to watch on the Oklahoma Sports Network. Just search your Apple and Android devices by searching the Oklahoma Sports Network. And then on social media, you can find us on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook, in your home devices, on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. And we're always on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. So from the Cameron Studio podcast and room, and we appreciate their opportunity for their sponsorship of allowing us to have that. This is another edition of The Point After on the Oklahoma Sports Network.